I'll be editing that part because my mom came into the room not knowing I was recording. Again, I'm sorry for her interrupting. Let's continue the video with the second story.
I became a mom pretty early on in life. I was 24 when I had my son Ryan, and by 26, I had my daughter Jessica. My marriage didn't work out, so I became a single mom as I loved my kids with all my heart. As my kids grew up, I noticed that they particularly had a fondness for the Halloween holiday. Their faces lit up every single time the 31st of October was approaching, and I could see their
This is
excitement
me,
as I made their
honestly.
costumes. Every year, I threw a Halloween party at our house. I would invite the whole neighborhood to come with their children, and after the first successful party, it soon became a wonderful tradition. Well, it was, till the arrival of our new neighbor, Angus Duncan. Now, Mr. Angus was a peculiar man, as the only thing you could describe him as was an old soul, or he preferred to live in the past. For example, while others used lawnmowers to cut their lawns, Mr. Angus preferred to manually cut his by using a cutlass. And when you tried to call him, he'd tell you to write him using a letter. I remember asking him, why don't you like using the new methods, Mr. Angus? They are much more easier. I remember him looking directly at me and replying, the original is always better. At the time, I didn't know what this truly meant, so I remember laughing it off and saying, well, you can't argue with that. Until today, I deeply regret those words. The month of October was quickly approaching, and I had begun to set up the annual Halloween party I had always hosted. I remember sending out all the invites the day before through email, and that's when I remembered about our new neighbor, Mr. Angus. While Mr. Angus didn't have any kids, I thought it'd be rude not to invite him over. Due to his peculiar behavior, he didn't have much friends, so I decided to invite him to the party. I
Don't.
didn't have time to write a letter, so I just walked up to his house and asked him if he wanted to come. I remember saying, sorry to disturb you, Mr. Angus, but I normally throw a neighborhood Halloween party. Would you be interested in coming? I remember he looked irritated at the sound of the word Halloween, and he said, Halloween? Don't you mean Samhain? Confused, I replied, I'm sorry. I don't understand what you mean. And that's when he said, Samhain, summer's end. You know what? Never mind. You people don't know how to truly celebrate it anyway. My confusion continued to rise, but I just replied with, oh, I'm sorry. It's just something I do for the kids, and I thought you'd be interested. His ears picked up at the sound of kids, and that's when he said, kids? The children are going to be there? I was still confused as to why he was now interested, as he knew kids were coming, but I brushed it off and said, yeah, it's actually
Don't.
really for them. And that's when he looked at me and said, I'll be there to show you how to truly celebrate Halloween. And with that,
No.
he shut the door. As I
No.
walked back home, I was still a
No.
little phased at what an odd man he was.
No,
But
I
I
just
thought to
sense a
myself,
bad feeling before
there's
I
nothing
even
wrong
watched
with him.
this video.
He's just a little
Well,
different,
before
and
the story
there's nothing
anyway.
wrong with that. But come tomorrow, I'd realize how truly different Mr. Angus was. The party started out great as usual. The children were having fun playing around in their costumes, and their parents were chatting away with themselves. Angus arrived in the middle of the party, and he came with a box full of candy that I had never seen before. They weren't wrapped in a wrapper, so I assumed that was odd. I walked up to him and said, welcome, Mr. Angus. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. As I spoke, I noticed he wasn't paying attention to me. Instead, he was intensely staring at all the playing children. I began to sense a bit of dread, but I brushed it off as one of his odd behaviors. I then asked him,
No,
is
he's
that candy?
crazy. He's
And he
crazy.
said, yes, handmade candy from my homeland. I then said, that's great. I'll just take that from you and place it on the table. And that's when he said, no, I'll give it to the children myself. And with that,
This is
he
sus.
walked away.
This is how
A
mighty
feeling
sus.
told me something wasn't right, but as I was about to follow him, one of the kids broke a lamp, so I became distracted. After a while, I cleaned up the lamp, and I was about to go look for him.
Wait, how did he magically
That's
fix
when
the
Mr.
lamp?
Angus appeared, and at the top of his lungs he said, come here, kids. I have magical candy for all of you from my hometown. What he said got all the kids' attention, even my children. And that's when they all began to rush him and take the candy he was
I bet
sharing.
the candy is
They all put
poisoned.
candy in their
I
mouths,
bet
and
you.
by their smiles, I could tell it was really good. In about 3 minutes, the candy was gone, as all the kids had finally taken and finished the candy. I began to think to myself about how it was a great idea to invite Mr. Angus.
No.
But in under 2 minutes, I regretted that decision, as the most horrifying scene began to play out
No,
before
they're
my
poisoned.
eyes. The children began to act erratic as they began to gasp for breath, and within seconds, they all began to convulse and fall to the floor.
I knew it.
Instinctively, I ran towards my kids, Ryan and Jessica, and I began to hold them. I
Hose
was
them.
confused and scared, and I began to scream.
I'm reading the subtitles right
"Somebody
now.
get help!" Parents were carrying their children and bolting to the door, but all the doors were locked. The chaos began to increase tenfold, and amidst all of it, we heard Mr. Angus scream, "Witness, Samhain!" Silence filled the room as we all stared at him, and that's when he began to pace the room. Speaking, he said, "Be gladdened, for their sacrifice will protect us from the Dark Ones. This is the way it has been, and this is the way it should be. The veil is thin,
No.
and the journey should be quick. We should all remember death is inevitable. Their sacrifice will be appreciated, and they will be reborn." While he was speaking, upon hearing the words, "dying and sacrifice," I noticed my kids weren't moving, and I looked around the room to see the same, as the look of pain and confusion was on the face of every single parent. Sobs began to fill the room, as every parent had also noticed what had happened. That's when Mr. Angus began to speak again. "Don't cry. I did this. I did this for you, for us. I had to. They had to be sacrificed.
This is
so you could
freaky.
always bear more children." As he said the words, "I did this," the room became tense as the horrific realization dawned on us. The homemade candy. It didn't take long before the men rushed towards Mr. Angus, and they began to subdue him. The doors were broken down, and numerous calls were made. Within minutes, the police and the paramedics were flooding through the house. Deep down, I knew it was already pointless, as I held the cold corpse of my 2 kids in my arms. The following weeks were filled with numerous investigations and questioning. I was called to give a statement, and I told the policemen everything that I knew. By the time the investigation was finished, we were given reports, and we were told that Mr. Angus was a man with Celtic roots, and he was one of the few people who still practiced Celtic paganism. One of the cops said, "Samhain was the origin of Halloween. Old Celtics believed that on the 31st of October,
Check out the time.
the veil between our world and the world of the dead becomes thin." According to research, they also believed that evil and troubled spirits could also come over. So to stop that,
Oh.
they performed animal sacrifices in order to appease these spirits. Mr. Angus himself confirmed this as his motive, and he knew he had to perform a sacrifice. But unlike the Celtics, he knew he didn't have time to gather animals, so his twisted mind decided to use the children as a sacrifice, which is why high traces of cyanide were found in the corpses of all 34 children, as the candy he made was laced with it. Mr. Angus was given life imprisonment, but even then, I felt like the justice system failed me, as I knew filth like him deserved to die. I buried my 7-year-old son Ryan and my 5-year-old daughter Jessica. Even after 5 years, there is no stopping the pain. It also stings every time I heard someone say, "The original is always better."
What does a Carowinds Gold Pass
Stupid
get?
ad.
Summer fun? More like all seasons of fun. You get unlimited.
Let's just finish the last story because I'll have to go to school soon.
Every night before Halloween, an uncanny feeling rushes down my spine. I grew up in a town in Alabama with my little sister Kathy and my dad. Our mom died when we were too young to understand what death is. Since then, Dad raised us with utmost love and care. My sister was a quiet kid, and I was the talkative one. She had difficulties in making friends because of her quiet nature, so I always took her with me whenever I played with my friends. I loved her, and felt the need to be there for her all the time. From a very young age, I realized that she could have used some motherly affection from me. She used to dress up in front of the mirror and ask me and Dad how she looked. No matter how funny she looked, we always replied with a smile. "You look like a beautiful young lady." Our compliment ended up putting a smile on her face and joy in our hearts. We went to the same school, so all my friends and kids from our neighborhood knew my sister. Some of
Ooh.
them picked on me, saying my sister is weird and she only tags along because no one wants to be the friend of such an extent that he refused to remarry ever again. My aunt tried a lot to fix him for a date with her friend, but my dad refused right away. I knew he had another reason to refuse to get married, and that was his children. He thought, no stepmom will ever love us like her own. My dad has sacrificed a lot just to give me and my sister a happy life. Being kids, we generally took part in every community event, and everyone in town loved us. It was the month of Halloween.
I
and
love
was
Halloween.
excited
I
to go
love
out
Halloween. I
trick-or-treating
can't wait to
with
go
my
out
friends.
this year.
I was 6, and Kathy was 4 years old at the time. Kathy was nervous because it was her first Halloween. We decorated our porch with carved pumpkin heads. Dad bought us all the things we put our hands on for Halloween. My best friend Jim and I were sipping on lemonade, sitting on our porch, and watching the entire locality buckling up to celebrate Halloween. Kids were running everywhere, and people were laughing and decorating the town. Suddenly, I heard Kathy talking to someone. Her room window is right beside where we were sitting. Dad went to get some groceries, and I was the man of the house at that point. So, I was pretty aware that Kathy is alone in her room.
I'm here.
Then who is she talking to?
Behind
I
you.
don't
I
know.
got up and went to her window. Who are you talking to? I peeked in and saw Kathy was sitting on her bed, holding her teddy bear, and staring at the closed door. Her pace turned
This
pale as I
reminds
caught
me
her
of
off
the
guard.
movie Mama.
She nodded her head, saying, "No one? Why are you standing outside my window?" I smiled and said, "Dad has gone to the market. Jim and I are sitting on the porch. Call me if you need anything." She smiled back, and I came back. The same night, we were having dinner. Dad was cooking steak for us. I was sitting at the dining table and talking to him about our Halloween costume when we heard Kathy humming a tune. I have never heard this tune before, so it felt a bit unusual. She was sitting on the porch braiding her Barbie doll and humming this tune like we weren't even there. I looked at Dad and got surprised. His face was white like a blank sheet. He stopped cooking and asked Kathy, "Who taught you this tune?" Kathy looked at us and said, "What tune?" "The tune you were just humming," Dad replied. "I wasn't humming any tune." Her aloof behavior made me confused. I looked at Dad and said, "Why, Dad? What is it about that
These
tune?"
glasses are only good for
Dad got back to
distance,
his
like
cooking,
close
saying,
distance, not
"Nothing.
far.
Let's eat." We finished our dinner and
Sorry,
went to
I
bed.
just woke up this
It was around
morning.
midnight
Latte.
when I woke up hearing a chuckle from Kathy's room. She was laughing.
Oh, she's staring at the
Laughing
balloons
in a long
that I
time.
got
I got up
from the
and walked
birthday.
to her room
Oh.
to tell her to go to bed. As I opened her bedroom door, I saw her lampshade falling on the floor, creating a loud thud. In that fraction of a second, I didn't fail to notice how the lampshade was levitating in the air, and Kathy laughed seeing that. "What was that?" "What do you mean? How was it on the air?" "No, it wasn't." Standing in her room, I felt extremely cold. Kathy lied down and closed her eyes, ignoring me completely. The next
Wow.
morning, when I told Dad about this, I saw him get worried. But the joy of Halloween distracted us from that one important matter that we shouldn't have overlooked. As the kids came out in the neighborhood, dressed up in their Halloween costumes, they were knocking from house to house with their buckets to collect as much candy as possible. Their
I
cheerful
want to make sure I
voices
get a
echoed in
lot
the
this
town
year
as
because
they
I
cried in
only have a
joy.
year. I
Trick-or-treat.
can only go
I wore my
probably one more
favorite Batman
time after
costume,
this
and
year.
Kathy dressed up as Superman. We came out and met my friends, Jim and Mike, on our way to the sugar hunt. After covering almost every house in our neighborhood, Jim said to go a bit far to find some more houses. Even though Dad told me not to go too far with Kathy. But that one night, I did act like my age. We walked on the empty sidewalks, keeping our
You
locality
did act
behind
like
us.
your age? That's
There
not
was not
acting
much
your age.
residence nearby, and the deep woods starts onwards too.
Ooh.
On that dark Halloween night, I could see Kathy getting scared. She said we should go back, but I assured her nothing will happen. After walking for some minutes more, we came in front of an old house.
No.
The house looked
No.
completely abandoned, but there
No.
was a big pumpkin head placed on the porch. A candle was burning inside it. "Let's go to that house,"
No.
Jim said.
No.
Mike and I thought for a second, but then we all started walking towards the house. I turned back and saw Kathy wasn't following us. She was just standing behind with a freaked out face. I asked her, "What is it?" She said, "We shouldn't be going there. We should go back." I told her to wait near the stairs while we walked to the porch and knocked on the
Slowly.
door. We knocked, but no one answered. Mike kicked on the door out of frustration,
Damn.
and it creaked open. The dark hallway
No
stood
thanks.
in front of us.
No
A
thanks.
smell of old house choked my nostrils as the door
I
opened.
smell of old house.
"Anyone home?" I asked. A long pause went by, and no one replied. We all turned around to leave, just when a woman spoke from the darkness of the hallway.
No.
Come on in.
No.
I was about to take the first step when Kathy rushed to me and grabbed my hand saying, "Don't! It's her! She wants to hurt you! Who are you talking about?" "Blue-faced mommy." "What?"
Blue-faced
Three of us
mommy?
almost shit our pants hearing this from Kathy. Mike didn't even wait. He turned around and ran away. Jim followed him too. I stood in front of the dark house porch with Kathy. Suddenly, the woman inside spoke again. "Kathy, bring him in." This time, her voice sounded rough and pissed off. Kathy screamed, saying, "You're not my mommy. Bring him in."
Yeah, with red
When
too.
we reached home, she busted into tears holding my dad. She said in a sobbing voice, "I lied to you. Blue-faced mommy taught me that tune. I don't like her anymore, Daddy. She wants you and Henry dead." I could see the fear in my dad's face. He uttered in a fumbling voice, How does she look like?" "Her face is blue and her eyes have no eyelids. She scares me. I don't want her to visit me at night anymore." That night, we all slept in Kathy's room. I remembered my dad shouting in the middle of the night, "We don't need you. Leave me and my family in peace." That Halloween was the last time Kathy talked about Blue-faced mommy. I don't know if she was
It's a little
scared,
freaky,
and I
don't you
even
think?
want to know. But whoever in that house told me to come in surely had bad intentions. Bring him in.
Well, I will leave the description for the channel that I reacted to below. And I hope y'all liked the video. Have a wonderful day or evening. Goodbye. Hate when it's